In December of 1900, 80 of the richest men in America sat down to dinner in a club in New York, and one young man stood up to speak. He had no notes. An hour and a half later, a decision had been reached in that room worth $600 million, and not one shovel of ore had been moved to earn it. $600 million for a decision. I put that in front of you first because I want the size of the thing fixed in your mind before we go any further. You have been poor in your mind for a long while now, some of you for a great many years. Here is what I want you to understand about those years. They do not have to be worked off the way a man works off a debt, a little at a time, with his hat in his hand. They can be ended in an evening, not by labor, not by luck, by a decision reached in the ordinary way, in an ordinary room, by an ordinary man who was finished with waiting. I have spent a long life taking apart the working method of men who made fortunes, and I will tell you plainly that this is the piece almost nobody looks at. They look at the money. The money was the last thing that happened. Sit still a while. I will show you where it begins. A dinner in New York, and a fortune made before midnight. The young man was 38 years old, and he ran the steel works. He had come up along a river in Pennsylvania, and most of the men in that dining room had never met him. It was the 12th of December. Two friends had arranged the evening to introduce him to the banking men of the East, and the banking men had come out of politeness, expecting 15 minutes of pleasant nothing after the 7 courses. He spoke for an hour and a half. Nobody wrote it down. That is the strange part, and I have never stopped finding it strange. The most consequential speech in the history of American industry was given without a record, and what survives is only the effect it had. He did not talk about himself. He described a thing that did not exist. One company, holding the best mills in the country, making steel from the ore all the way to the finished article, selling cheaply enough to take the trade of the world. He laid it out in detail, the way a man describes a house he already lives in. When he sat down, the banker who had come to stay half an hour did not leave. He took the young man to a window seat at the side of the room, and the two of them sat there with their legs hanging off a high sill and talked for another hour. Then the banker went home and thought about it for a week. At the end of that week, he sent for the young man, and the young man came to his library carrying 6 sheets of figures in his own handwriting. And inside 3 months, the thing that had existed only in a speech was the largest corporation on earth. Now, understand what actually moved. No invention, no discovery, no new process for making steel. A picture was carried from one mind into another mind, and a decision was made about it. That is the whole mechanism, and the 600 millions was the receipt. What mental poverty actually is. I use the phrase deliberately, and I had better say what I mean by it, because it is not a mood, and it is not low spirits. Mental poverty is the condition of a man who has not decided. He is not lazy. Very often he works harder than the men above him, and that is precisely what confuses him. He rises early. He carries his share. He is tired at the end of a day, and he cannot see what he is doing wrong. What he is doing wrong is that he has never once in his whole life sat down and settled a thing. He would like more money. He has not said how much. He would like different work. He has not said what work. He would like the whole business of his life to improve, and if you stopped him in the street and asked him what improvement would look like on the day it arrived, he could not tell you inside 10 minutes of talking. A man in that condition is not poor because the world has kept something from him. He is poor because he has never issued an order that anything could be done about. I analyzed something over 25,000 men and women who had failed, and I put their reasons in a list of 30. The lack of a definite power of decision stood near the head of it. Not at the middle, near the head, and when I went to the other end and studied several hundred people who had accumulated fortunes past the $1 million mark, every one of them, without a single exception, had the same habit running the other way. They reached decisions quickly. They changed them slowly, if they changed them at all. Consider what that means. It is not intelligence, it is not schooling, it is not the family a man came out of. It is the speed at which he closes a question and the reluctance with which he reopens it. Poverty of the mind is a question left open. That is all it has ever been. The man who has opinions that are not his own. There is a kind of man I want you to look at, because you may be him. And if you are, you will not have noticed. He permits himself to be influenced and controlled by circumstances outside his own mind. He does not know what he wants from life, and he spends all of his time getting exactly that. He has a great many opinions. Not one of them is his. He picked them up from the newspaper, from the men he eats his dinner beside, from a relative who has never succeeded at anything and has firm views on everything. I call such a man a drifter, and the word is exact. He is not sinking, he is floating, and he is going wherever the water goes. Ask him why he did not take the position when it was offered. He will tell you what his brother-in-law said about that trade. Ask him why he abandoned the thing he began 3 years ago. He will tell you that people said it could not be done. Opinions are the cheapest commodities on earth. Every man alive has a flock of them ready to be wished upon anybody who will take them, and they cost the giver nothing whatsoever, which is precisely why they are given so freely. Here is the hard sentence, and I will not soften it. If you are influenced by the opinions of others, you will have no desire of your own. Understand what is being traded away there. Not a job, not an evening. The capacity to want a particular thing, which is the only fuel any of this runs on. The men who ridicule your intention are not usually cruel. They are frightened, and your definiteness frightens them, because a man who has decided is a standing accusation against every man near him who has not. Thousands carry a sense of their own smallness the whole way to the grave, because at one moment somebody who meant no harm destroyed their confidence with an opinion or with a piece of ridicule that was intended to be funny. You have a brain and a mind of your own. Use it and reach your own decisions. What the man who does not drift looks like. I have set the drifter out at some length, and setting him out is not enough, because a man can recognize himself in a portrait and still have no idea what he is supposed to become instead. So let me draw the other one for you, and I want you to notice how little there is to him. He is not cleverer than the drifter. That is the first thing, and most men will not believe it. He is very often the slower of the two in conversation, and he is almost always the duller company, because a man who is going somewhere in particular has less appetite for argument than a man who is going nowhere at all. He knows what he wants. That is nearly the whole of it. He knows it in the way you know your own address, without hunting for it, without qualifying it, without producing 3 versions of it, depending on who is asking. Put the question to him at a dinner table, and the answer comes back in 1 sentence and does not wander. Ask a drifter the same thing, and you will get a paragraph, and the paragraph will contain the words probably, eventually, and someday. The second thing about him is that he is not waiting to be given anything. He does not believe a position will be offered, or a chance will arrive, or a relative will die at a convenient moment. He has stopped negotiating with the world about terms and has begun stating them. The third thing is the one that surprises people. He changes his mind slowly to the point of being called stubborn, and he has called it regularly. He is not being stubborn. He simply understands what a decision cost him to reach and declines to spend it again every Thursday because somebody at the next desk had a thought. And the fourth thing is that he keeps his own counsel, which we shall come to properly in a while. Now here is the observation I want to leave you with, and I set it down as a fact I have watched hold true for a very long time. In every kind of work, in every part of the country, the men who do not drift and the men who hold most of the wealth of the world are the same men. Not similar men, the same men. It is not that decisiveness tends to pay, in a general way, over a long enough period if a man is fortunate. It is that the two things are one thing observed from different sides, the way heat and light come off the same fire. Poverty of the mind spreads through a house like an illness, and you will find it wherever men are drifting, and you will not find it among those who know what they want and have settled on having it. So when I tell you to decide tonight, I am not handing you a piece of encouragement. I am telling you the entrance fee. Why the habit hardens until nature takes it over. I want to explain why this gets worse with time, because it does, and the reason is mechanical rather than moral. Any thought which the mind repeats over and over through habit forms itself into a rhythm. Watch a musician learning a piece. First, the notes are memorized. Then they are related to one another by melody and by repetition, and at some point the man stops choosing the notes and the piece simply plays out of him. The mind does that with everything, and it does not ask you whether the tune is a good one. Repeat indecision often enough, and it reaches the proportion of hypnotic rhythm, which is the last stage of habit. After that, the habit cannot be broken by ordinary effort, because nature has taken it over and made it permanent. It is something like a whirlpool in a river. An object may float on that river indefinitely and come to no harm. But once it is caught in the whirlpool, it goes round and round, and it cannot get out, and nothing about the water has changed at all. That is what has happened to the man of 50 who says he is too old to begin. He is not too old, he is going round. Now look at what this means for you tonight, because it is not all bad news. The rhythm is indifferent to the content. It will carry a habit of decision exactly as faithfully as it has carried the habit of putting things off. The machinery that has been holding you where you are is the same machinery that will hold you where you intend to be, and it does not have to be built. It is already running. It has been running your whole life. All that is required is to change what is fed into it. But it must be fed something definite. Rhythm cannot form around a wish. It forms around a repetition, and you cannot repeat what you have never once stated. That is why the decision comes first, before the plan, before the work, before the money. Everything downstream needs something to organize itself around. The lamp that was decided 10,000 times. There is an objection forming in your mind, and I would rather answer it now than have it sit there quietly spoiling everything that follows. The objection is this: you have decided before. You decided in January, and you decided again after the last disappointment, and here you are, no further on, listening to a man tell you to decide again. Good. Then you already know the thing most people have to be taught, which is that a decision does not survive on its own. Consider the man who gave us the electric lamp. He is remembered for a moment of triumph, and the moment of triumph is the least interesting part of the record. What he actually did was fail, and fail, and fail again, through a number of attempts I have seen given as 10,000. I will say plainly that the number has grown in the telling, the habit has not. Understand what those attempts were. Each one was not a fresh decision. Each one was the same decision held while the evidence came back and said no. That is the whole distinction, and I want it very clear. You have not decided 10 times and failed. You have made a first decision 10 times and abandoned it 10 times at the first contrary evidence, which is not the same act at all. A decision made in January and dropped in February was never a decision. It was an intention with a good coat on. The man in the laboratory was not braver than you. He had simply settled the question of whether the thing would be done and left open only the question of how. And once a man has arranged his mind that way, a failed attempt is information. It is not a verdict. It cannot be a verdict, because the verdict was returned before the work began. Look at what that does to defeat. If the question is still open, every setback votes. 10 setbacks, and the thing is voted down, and you go quietly back to the life you had. If the question is closed, a setback tells you only that this particular plan was unsound, and a plan is a cheap thing to replace. Build another. Start again. Nothing has happened to the decision, because the decision was never up for election. That is why I keep returning to the word settled, and why the fourth of my instructions tonight will be the one about not reopening the question. Men do not fail for want of ability. They fail because they put the verdict and the method into the same envelope, so that when the method is disproved, the verdict goes into the fire with it. Keep them apart, and you may be defeated 100 times without once being beaten. A room in Boston with the door locked. Let me take you to the strongest example I know, and it did not happen in a counting house. It begins on the 5th of March, 1770, in Boston. British soldiers were patrolling the streets, and their presence was a threat and was meant to be. The townspeople resented armed men marching about among them and began to say so, and then to throw things, and the officer in command gave the order to fix bayonets and charge. Men died in that street. The Assembly of the Colonists called a meeting. 2 of the men at it were John Hancock and Samuel Adams, and they stood up and said that a move must be made to put every British soldier out of Boston. Hold there a moment. 2 men. A decision in 2 minds. Nothing else existed yet. No army, no Congress, no country, and no realistic prospect of any of the 3. The troops were withdrawn, but the thing had started, and it did not stop. Adams and a man in Virginia named Richard Henry Lee had been writing to each other for years, sharing their fears and their hopes about the people of their provinces, and out of that correspondence, Adams took an idea. If two men writing letters could think together, then 13 colonies writing letters could act together. He put it to the Assembly as a motion that a committee of correspondence be set up among all the colonies with appointed men in each one. That is organized planning, and it is the plainest example of it I have ever found. Notice the order of events. The decision was made in 17